everyone. Today's editorial with respect to international relations. One is from the Hindu and one is from the Indian Express. The first article that I'm taking is from the Indian Express, India's Iran test. As we all know that basically USA has extract out itself from the nuclear deal that the P5 plus 1 nations have signed. P5, that means the permanent members, 5 permanent members of United Nations Security Council, and one is Germany. They have signed a nuclear deal with Iran. Fine. So USA have basically removed itself from the deal, and that has caused in its stability not only in the relations of USA and Iran, but the countries like India and China, which are basically importing crude oil from Iran. They are also facing the issues because see, India is having relationship with USA, and USA is now forcing countries like India and China that they better remove themselves or extract whatever the deals they're having with Iran, because USA has put sanctions against it. So this is the issue. So let's see what is there in the article. So it's saying that this Delhi should cut its energy and other ties to Tehran, which is the capital of Iran. Uh, puts Iran back at the top of India's list of difficult foreign policy change. Basically, the article is saying that it's really a difficult time for India's foreign policy, and it's a challenge for India's foreign policy because India has to cut its energy and whatever sort of other ties India is having with Iran because of the pressure that is mounted by US. Fine. So and India is not the only one being targeted by President Donald Trump. He is basically forcing and pressing all of America's major partners that they should rethink their engagement with Iran. Fine, because USA has walked out of the 2015 international nuclear agreement with Iran, and which was so difficult when Barack Obama, when he tried to bring out this nuclear agreement with Iran. It was really very difficult, and Donald Trump, known for its unpredictability, has basically walked out of this agreement. So this is not the first time that Iran has emerged as a problem between India and United States. The question of India's relationship with Iran, it became one of the major problem in Delhi's negotiations with USA on civil nuclear cooperation during 2005 and 8. Actually, when in 2005 and 8 period, India signed its civil nuclear agreement with USA, at that time also, because India was having some sort of ties with Iran, so that time also India faced challenge with respect to its foreign policy, that how to manage the relationship, how to manage its bilateral relationship with Iran, and alongside with the bilateral relationship with USA. Fine. So at that time also there was a challenge for India, and similarly a challenge India is right now facing. Then the optimist, fine, they are hoping that this present crisis would sooner, it would sooner be passing by, and because we know right now America is quite unpredictable, and there may be chances that Donald Trump, who is known for its unpredictability, can this change his decision basically. So because they are saying that, see, earlier during this year only, the last year, US was pressing India. US was basically forcing, kind of forcing, okay, but officially we cannot use the term forcing, but it is a force. So US was pressing India that to cut its ties with North Korea. But this year what we saw, that USA was having meetings and summit with North Korea. So in this way we can expect that there may be some drastic changes with respect to USA Iran policy. Now, realist, as we say in politics, they are realist thinkers. So they say that Iran question is basically going to be messier because see, the Donald Trump, he is basically ready for an all-out confrontation with Iran. He's ready to do it, and this new targeting of Iran's oil is basically USA is trying to target the Islamic Republic, which is established after a prolonged revolution in Iran. Fine. And this Donald Trump, he is being supported by Israel, because we know that Israel is, of course, against, anti to Iran. So this is Trump's decision with respect to Iran is supported by Israel and is basically instigated by the Israel. So because as Israel see this Islamic Republic of Iran as its main threat in the region. And one more thing is also there is several players involved in this. Okay, this Trump's new approach with respect to Iran is also welcomed by Saudi Arabia and UAE. To be keep in mind that Iran is a Shia dominated country, fine, and Saudi Arabia and UAE are Sunni dominated country, and so obviously Shia Sunni conflict is at its peak right now in the Middle East. And so in the case of this Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iran. But Saudi Arabia and UAE, they basically see Iran as, that Iran is one, according to them, Iran is one such country which is basically undermining the legitimacy of the Sunni Arab regimes in the Middle East. And they kind of accuse Iran that Iran tried to interfere in the internal matters of their countries, and Iran try to, instigate and try to foment discontent among the Shia minorities which are there in Saudi Arabia and UAE. So these are the allegations which are basically put by the Saudi Arabia and UAE against Iran. So definitely this move of USA, fine, is a welcome move on the part of Saudi Arabia and UAE. But obviously it's a problem for India. And see, this is really a very difficult problem for India, because India has its close ties with UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel too, fine. And at the same time we are also having ties with Iran, and most importantly Iran is strategically very important for India, because we know that with the Chahabar port we are trying to reach the Central Asian markets, and we are trying to bypass, Pakistan, and via Chahabar port in Iran to this Afghanistan, we are trying to reach Central Asia and then to the European markets. So Iran is strategically very important for India, fine. So these all are actors and these all are reasons basically, and India now has to decide on the merit of each and every, situation, fine. So India has no choice right now but to carefully assess the cost and benefit of various options at hand, fine. And what else is there? Yeah. And what is more important is the impact of an extended regional conflict, and at the same time there is a conflict going on in the entire Middle East, engulfing Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, which is definitely putting a question on the security of South Asian regions. So I mean, India has to decide that what sort of actions it is going to take, and Delhi needs to set up its engagement with all sides and offer its good offices to help reduce tension between Shia, Iran, and Sunni Arab neighbors. So, what they're trying to say is that, see, India has to do two things. First of all, India has to decide the merit and demerit of each relationship, that to whom, with whom India has to go beyond, right? Secondly, what India has to do, India has to act as a balancer, so that it can balance out the interest of Shia people or Shia countries and Sunni Arab neighbors as well. Because if Shia Sunni conflict it goes on, for prolonged period, then that will definitely put a question mark on the security of South Asia, fine. So that's why this entire issue of USA walking out of the nuclear agreement with Iran and USA pressing India to cut its ties with Iran is, creating a huge challenge for Indian foreign policy. And it's the time that India has to decide according to the merits and demerits of the equations that India is having with each and every nation in the Middle East and with the USA, that what sort of things and what sort of relationship is going to be fruitful for India's own national interest in the long run, and only then India has to take certain decisions, fine. So this was the whole article with respect to USA, Iran, and India. Now next article that we are having is of the Hindu. Okay, This article is with respect to the soft diplomacy in the Indian Ocean region, and the article is saying that India should pursue the soft diplomacy or should use more of the soft power in the Indian Ocean region, and it is with respect to the Seychelles. Basically, what happened that India and Seychelles had signed an agreement with respect to the Assumption Island, which is obviously and Seychelles territory. Fine. And so this is the Assumption Island, and according to this agreement, India could basically employ its basically there was a agreement to build a naval base, and India was there to build the naval base, and India could employ its military troops over there. Fine. But the thing is that right now the agreement is not there. Fine. So let's see what the article is saying. It's saying that see the actually the Seychelles president Danny Foray, I guess it's the right pronunciation. So Danny Foray last week came against the backdrop of setbacks in the bilateral relationship. See, we are having some sort of setbacks with respect to the bilateral relationship we are having with Seychelles, and last week the president they visited India. So it was expected that because the agreement with respect to the Assumption Island is no more right now. Fine, it's in the it's no more. So there was expectations that India would give a very cold welcome to the Seychelles president, but it was not the case. So let's see what was the case. So what happened that in on this Assumption Island, basically the agreement which was there, the pact was to build a naval base on the island, and definitely it was a very strategic enhancement for India in the Indian Ocean region, right? And this pact was there in discussion since 2003. Fine. And it was finally signed during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the Seychelles in 2015. It was signed in 2015, but the thing was, and let me tell you what was there in the agreement. So the deal was to include 30-year access to the base. India could access that base for a period of 30 years, and there was permission that India could also station its military personnel on the ground with facilities on the island. Funding was to be given by India. Fine. But that base would be owned by Seychelles, and it would be jointly managed. But what happened that after, in 2015 when the agreement was signed, then there was opposition in Seychelles. Fine. And they said that Seychelles government is basically undermining the sovereignty of the country. Fine. So opposition protest about loss of sovereignty. So India it tried to renegotiate the agreement because it's one of the principle of our foreign policy that we will not interfere in the sovereignty, or we will not try to basically undermine sovereignty of other nations. So India it tried to renegotiate, and it amended its version in January 2018, but that was also not sufficient, and there was again opposition. And Mr. Foray, the president, he lacks the numbers in the legislature to ratify the agreement. So obviously, the agreement could not take off. Instead, so what they said that agreement is no more, and instead, the naval base, which was earlier to be built by India, Seychelles would build the naval facility on its own. Fine, they came up with this decision. So definitely it was a blow to India's plans. It was a blow to India's strategic aspirations, ambitions in the Indian Ocean region. But the thing is that the kind of cold reception, as I told earlier, the kind of cold reception that was expected in the wake of all these incidents, that was not the case. Fine. Both sides, Seychelles and India, they decided to walk around the minefield relating to Assumption Island. That means what? They tried to put Assumption Island on one side, and they tried to talk about other matters. Fine, that we will keep it aside and we'll talk with respect to our bilateral relationship, but we will not talk about Assumption Island for the time being. Okay. And what happened that India even announced a credit line of $100 million for Seychelles to purchase defense equipment from India, so that it can build its maritime capacity as well as its civilian infrastructure And at the same time, India also handed over a Dornier aircraft for maritime surveillance purposes to Seychelles. So definitely, these these activities of India, they show a kind of soft diplomacy that is India is trying to play with Seychelles, right? And this is indeed a good strategy, and because it would have been pointless if we try to push or force Seychelles president that no, please try to come with a concrete agreement, until and unless you come to agreement we will not welcome you, we will try to give a cold reception to you. So all these things would be not that much fruitful for India. So in the thing is ki, with respect to the case of Maldives in Indian Ocean region and the kind of military intervention that was expected from India in the case of Maldives and all these things, and the stand of Indian government, they have create kind of uh, the thing is that this particular step of India with respect to Maldives, it was not a welcome step, and Maldivian government, in fact, they cancelled the Milan exercise which was there to be held with India, naval exercise. It was a naval exercise. So all these things, they just indicate towards one direction, that right now what is the right approach is that India should pursue the soft power diplomacy only. Fine. And until 2021, when Seychelles is due for presidential and parliamentary elections, it may not be possible to move the agreement further for ratification. So, till that time, India has to wait actually. It is better to keep that agreement in suspension, fine, and negotiate on other matters. So this softer approach adopted by the government is in remarkable contrast to the strong arm tactics it has used in the past with other countries in the Indian Ocean region, such as the Maldives, and I told you earlier. In fact, it was said that Maldives is basically insisting India on sending back Indian naval and coast guard helicopters from its atolls. Atolls means a group of islands. Fine. Uh, Atolls means it's basically a coral reef island. You must have read in the geography. Fine. So Maldives is basically trying to send back the Indian Naval and Coast Guard helicopters, and at the same time, Maldives is coming very close to China. So the equation between India and Maldives right now is not that comfortable. Fine. So India don't want to repeat that thing. India don't want its relationship with Seychelles to get worse, just because on the basis of Assumption Island. So whatever the approach Indian government has taken right now, it has been appreciated and it has been appraised, and they're saying that a less confrontational approach in the case of Seychelles, with quiet negotiations instead of public recrimination, indeed appears to have a more salutary effect. Fine. So this was the whole idea of that whatever the policy Indian government is having, that is a soft power diplomacy with respect to Seychelles in the Indian Ocean region, in the essence is that India should try to replicate these kind of actions and these kind of soft power approach with small island nations in the Indian, other small island nations in the Indian Ocean region as well. Only then the kind of ambitions that India is having with respect to the regional and global leadership, that can be achievable. So this was all about the international relations editorial in both the newspapers, and thank you.